In this video, we are going to address the origins of slavery in British North America. But first, let's provide some context by looking at a world overview of slavery and imperialism. In world history, slavery has been the rule, not the exception. It has been around since the dawn of history. Even colonialism or imperialism was also common throughout history prior to modern Western civilization. Examples include Persia, Macedonia, Babylon, China, the Turks, Mongols, Islam, African empires of Mali, Songhai, Ghana, Central American and South American empires of the Aztecs, Mayans, and the Incas. All of them conquered various territories, making the inhabitants, at least some of them, slaves. Slavery itself, as an institution, did not become a political problem until the rise of modern Western civilization, which is largely based upon the ancient Greek and Romans and Judeo-Christian principles. It was during the rise of modern Western civilization that Christianity began to interpret Scripture as prohibiting the ownership of man by man. When looking at all of world history, one discovers that it was only Western civilization that acted to end slavery. When it comes to the triangle trade, or more specifically the African slave trade, Africans in Africa were just as responsible for the Atlantic slave trade as Europeans. If not for Africans, it could not have happened. Africans dictated the terms of the trade. They acquired the slaves for the trade. And so Africans were not victims with a capital V. They were actively engaged in the slave trade. And when England moved to end the slave trade, to use their powerful navy to stop it from happening, Africans did not want the slave trade to end. They actively tried to keep it going. Why? Because they were making a lot of money on it. And here are some interesting facts. There were more white slaves in North Africa than black slaves in British North America. And of all the slaves that were taken from Africa and brought to the New World, less than 5% ended up in British North America, ended up in what eventually becomes the United States. The fact that slavery ended up occurring in British North America and eventually the United States of America shouldn't be a surprise. It was the norm throughout all of world history. As for the modern West, when Jamestown was settled in 1607, no one anywhere in the history of the world had criticized slavery as immoral. The first arguments about slavery's immorality arose in the Anglosphere in the late 17th century. The first anti-slavery society was formed in Philadelphia in 1775. The Royal Navy abolished the Middle Passage in the early 19th century. England outlawed slavery in 1833. Saudi Arabia didn't do that till 1970. And slavery is still common in Northwest Africa. As for America and slavery, for whatever reason, no other nation is criticized for this once universal institution. The West is treated as if it was the only civilization to have slavery, and is never recognized as taking the lead in abolishing it. Polls show Americans think slavery was an American institution. Some say America was founded on slavery. America, the United States, was founded on slavery in about the same way it was founded on outdoor plumbing. The fact of the matter is, slavery was a nasty fact of life throughout the world that Western civilization got rid of, and never defended as a principle. With that said, let's look at the origins of slavery in British North America. Some people incorrectly claim that 1619 was the beginning of slavery in British North America. That was the year that a Dutch warship sold 20 Africans to settlers in Jamestown. But these settlers did not treat these Africans as slaves. They were seen as indentured servants. When they purchased these Africans, they purchased them as indentured servants, which meant they had X amount of years to work for the person who paid for the fruit of their labor, and then they were set free. They were given their own land, their own tools to work that land, and were free like anyone else in that colony. And they were treated as such for 40 years. What changed all that was a combination of factors. First, in the 1660s, you have the introduction of the Barbados Slave Code in the 13 colonies, specifically in South Carolina. English planters in Barbados, who were crowded out by the larger plantations, picked up and moved to South Carolina, taking with them the slaves that they owned, as well as the slave code that Barbados had, a code that attached race to the condition of slavery. This is the first codification of chattel slavery in British North America, brought by English planters from Barbados. Interestingly, The first instance of lifelong slavery in Virginia was of a former indentured African servant enslaving another African. Although the Barbados Slave Code helps explain why race was attached to the condition of slavery, it does not completely explain the origins of slavery in British North America. For that, we need to understand the causes and effects of Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion occurs in 1676, but the factors that lead to this rebellion begin much earlier. It all starts with tobacco. Tobacco was a cash crop that exhausted the soil in the Chesapeake. And because it exhausted the soil of the Chesapeake, settlers and colonists who grew this crop had to continually move westward in search of more land. They also required labor, and the labor that they used and preferred were indentured servants. Over time, as they were moving westward, searching for more land to grow this tobacco, as more people from England began to move to the Jamestown, Virginia area, they began to encroach on Indian territory. As a result, Indians retaliate, or Indians attack, to try to preserve their area, their way of life. The settlers on the frontier, experiencing the attacks by these Indians, pleaded with the governor of Jamestown, Governor Berkeley. But Governor Berkeley didn't do anything, or didn't do enough to stop these attacks by these Indians on these former indentured servants who are attempting to make a living on the frontier. And so these former indentured servants, led by Nathaniel Bacon, took matters into their own hands. And they attacked the Indians back. And sadly, they attacked some Indians who were not responsible for any of the attacks on them. When that was finished, the rebellion was not over. Nathaniel Bacon and his followers turned on the government of Jamestown and burned most of it down. Eventually, the rebellion is put down because Nathaniel Bacon gets sick and dies. But it was after that that the majority landowners no longer trusted having indentured servants work for them. That was when they began to shift away from indentured servants and move to African slaves. And that, in combination with the Barbados Slave Code, explains the origins of slavery in British North America.